Welcome to Live at the Blue Box. It is now time for Input Junkie. Actually, you guys are here on a special night. Last week we had to cancel because of weather. And last week was ironically titled The Con Before the Storm. Yet it should have been more The Con During the Storm. And this week it should be The Con After the Storm, but we're still calling it The Con Before the Storm, even though The Con is all you. Winter is coming. Oh, we should have called it that. Way to fail. But the reason we're saying it's the con before the storm is it's before Thanksgiving. Oh, no, it's after Thanksgiving. Good night, everybody. I'm going to go home. It's before Christmas and all the Hanukkah and everything else that's going on. The hoopla. Yes, the con before the hoopla. So, all right. So we are going to interview author Russell Lissau, which I'm really excited to interview, Russell.
Excited to be here.
So, Russell, first of all, you don't know this, but when we started our network's been around for a couple of years now. When we started it, I went to C2E2. We had not started yet.
Okay.
I had barely done more than, I think at that point, 3 podcasts. But we knew we were starting a podcast network. And one of the first people I talked to was you.
Excellent.
And I never forgot.
Oh, thanks, man.
It was so fun because I was there in a different capacity than I had been before. I'd been press there. I'd been, a vendor there. But this was different. And
You're there as a professional.
I was. But we hadn't even started. But I talked to you, and you were so gracious, and we just had such a cool time. And I'm like, we have to figure out. We didn't have a platform to talk to you. And I'm like, we're going to figure it out. And then we go to the next thing, and Martha and Molly come up, and they go, we met this awesome guy. And I go, did he and his daughter write Strawberry Shortcake comics? What? But Trevor couldn't come. Oh.
I often play second banana to Trevor Mueller, so that's
yes,
okay.
Well, not in my heart. It was you. I knew immediately when they said it. I'm like, they go, and his daughter and I go, that's Russell. I know this guy.
Excellent.
And then we made a point, I don't know if you knew this, but every con we ran into you, it was because I'd look and see like, oh, he's here. And I'd made sure I'd go down that aisle and go, hey. And then when you reached out to me recently and you're like, hey, how about this date? It was like, yes, I would love to have you out here. So this is really
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks
awesome.
for having me out.
So, Russell, no, we didn't meet at MightyCon. No, you weren't at MightyCon.
I've done a MightyCon.
It wasn't the one. No, it was at C2E2 or Wizard World. Uh-oh. We're going to have a fight.
Controversy.
Somebody, yes. A controversy.
Was Meredith there with
yes.
me? Then it was Wizard World Chicago.
Bam. Yep.
Because she's done a couple shows with me.
Your daughter is Meredith. We should clarify.
Meredith Lissau, co-writer on Strawberry Shortcake. And she did a couple shows with me, mostly to, I'm a dad who writes comics.
Right.
I've got a daughter who's into comics.
Right.
I want to make a comic book with her, and that's why I took on the Strawberry Shortcake job.
I'm a dad who makes podcasts. My wife makes podcasts. We have a daughter that we want to, and
exactly right.
She, for a while there, I don't know if she still is, was the youngest host of a podcast on iTunes.
That's awesome.
I get it, man.
Yeah.
So is she still writing?
She is. Not with me. She has broken out on her own.
Oh, she has?
She has, which is very cool. She did a comic book for charity this year as a school project.
Cool.
One of the things that actually it was last year, at the end of 7th grade, one of the things they had to do was it was a gifted class project. She wanted to do a comic book about what UNICEF does in Africa and donate the proceeds to UNICEF.
Very cool.
Which is an organization that she really believes in and something she supported.
Sure.
And wrote a comic book script, a short story. I think it was 4 pages. I introduced her to an artist who I thought she'd like to work with. And she did, and contacted the artist and worked out a page rate and did it all herself. And then when it came time to get the book printed, we went to the local Kinko's in Arlington Heights, and I showed her how a book gets printed and folded and the whole thing. And we made a comic book.
That is awesome.
Yeah,
And how
she's
old is
pretty
she?
awesome.
She's 13?
Meredith is now 13, going on 21.
Yes,
yeah.
of course. Yes. Yes, but that is so awesome. So
Yeah.
is this something that this is all about Meredith at this point. You know, why didn't we have her?
It's all
We
about
could have
Meredith.
Meredith and Trevor here. It would have been a much better interview. I'm kidding. My mom's giving me shots. We're out there now. Is this something she wants to do? Does she want to be a writer? I don't mean just a comic book.
I don't know. You know, when you're 13,
at 13, it
what
could
do you
be
know
anything.
about life?
Yeah.
You know, what do you want to do? I know she likes being creative. I know she likes performing.
Yeah.
She likes marine biology. She's all over the board.
Sure. SeaWorld might be hiring. Perfect fit.
Could be. I know she likes telling stories. She's always liked telling stories.
Yeah.
And comic books are a great way to tell stories.
I totally agree. Now, that brings me to you.
Yes, sir.
So, we got a lot to talk about with you, okay?
Sure.
But I want to start here. Comic books. Did you start out wanting to be a comic book writer, or did you find that to be the medium that worked to get your story across?
You know, one of the common questions that comic book writers and comic book artists are asked is, how did you break in?
Yeah.
And I am 44 years old. I didn't start making comics until I was 34. I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Okay.
I never was one of those kids that wanted to make comic books when I grew up. I wanted to go to the store every week, buy my comics, go home, read them, come back the next week for the next chapter or the next issue, whatever it was.
But it wasn't like a burning desire, like, I'm going to make these.
I never wanted to. I made silly comic books as a kid, like kids do. You know, I
Sure.
folded over typing paper or loose leaf paper, and I drew pictures in them and word balloons and special effects. But I never wanted professionally to make comics.
Sure.
But because I was the office nerd at the Daily Herald, the guy who knew more about comic books than anybody else, whenever there was a comic book movie, I'd write about it.
Sure.
Or be asked to write about it.
Right.
Hey, there's a new X-Men movie. Let's ask Russell. You know. So I did that for a while, and I also started doing a lot of freelance magazine writing for North Shore Magazine, for Chicago, for the Miami Herald, for the Baltimore Sun, for the Advocate, for Curve Magazine, magazines and newspapers and webzines across the country, including Wizard. I was a regular writer at Wizard for a while. And I got to know people in the industry really well and became friends with a few of them. And over time, they encouraged me to start pitching to their editors.
Yes.
It was, I remember having a conversation with somebody, and they said, we know you know the industry. We know you know how to write. You're a working writer. You're an award-winning writer.
Right.
We know you know a lot about comics. We know you know what we do. You should start pitching stories. And I really wasn't interested. I wasn't interested at all until I had an idea for a story.
Okay.
And then I really...
And then it grabs you, right?
Totally grabs
It's
me.
totally what it does, right?
No, I was in the newsroom at the Herald one day. I was in the photo studio back when there was a photo studio.
Now it's a Mac.
Now it's all done on a computer, absolutely.
Right.
And I was standing over... I'm old, so this is going to be a throwback.
Not as old as I am, so...
I was standing over a light table looking at negatives through a loop.
Okay.
Looking at pictures that a photographer had shot, trying to figure out which would be the best one to go with, a story that I was working on. And I flashed on an idea, I flashed on an image of a photographer in Metropolis looking at a light table, looking at photo negatives on a light table, and realizing that in the sequence of negatives, he had accidentally captured Clark Kent turning into Superman.
Oh my gosh, what an awesome idea.
In the background, deep
right,
in the background.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And what to do with those photos.
Right.
Do you publish them?
Do you just tell Clark?
Do you publish them and win the Pulitzer Prize and get famous?
Right.
Or do you protect the identity of the world's greatest hero?
What a great idea, man.
And I was lucky enough to know Jeff Loeb, who was a Superman writer at the time.
And writes...
Tremendous writer.
Daredevil books are astounding.
Jeff and Tim Sale were both early, not only friends, but early supporters of mine as I was getting into comics.
Sure.
Guys who really became my mentors in a lot of ways.
That's awesome. Those good mentors to have, man.
Excellent mentors to have. And I had mentioned that story idea to Jeff. I'm like, I think this is a good story. What do you think? And he said, I think that's a great story idea. Here's the editor you need to talk to. And set me up with Eddie Berganza, who was the Superman editor at the time. This is like 12 years ago. And I had a meeting with Eddie Berganza at Wizard World Chicago in 2003, I think.
Okay.
And went up to Eddie, shook his hand, firm handshake, feeling professional. And he goes, well, Jeff says you're a guy you should talk to and that you want to write Superman. I said, yes, I do. He goes, well, today we announced that we've hired Brian Azzarello and Jim Lee to do Superman for the next year. We don't need any Superman stories. What else you got? And I said,
I mean, come on.
well, how do you compete with that, right?
Right.
He said, we're full up with Superman. What else you got?
Okay.
And
hey, foot's in the door.
Right. And on the spot, I said, well, I can do Batman. I'd always been a Batman fan. I always loved Batman.
Sure.
He said, I said I can do Batman. He
It's a
said,
sandbox you want to play in.
He said, well, start pitching us Batman stories. And I started pitching Batman stories. And after about a year and a half...
Was it a photographer called Batman and Bruce Wayne was changing into a cowl? And no, I'm kidding.
Completely different.
I would have done that. Story. That would have been my thing immediately. Okay, what about Ant-Man? He's getting into an Ant-Man costume.
Right. The
one story. Leave, please.
I'd still love to go back and do that Superman.
Sure,
story.
It sounds great.
It was a fun tale to do. Ironically, about 2 or 3 years ago, an acquaintance of mine in the industry, Clay Moore, who's a tremendous writer, wrote a very similar story.
Really?
And it was published in the digital first Superman title, Adventures of Superman.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
I haven't read that, but I just got into those digital things.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Jeff Loeb wrote a digital Daredevil, and I met the comic book artist on it.
Oh, excellent.
Who said, you need to read these. And it won an award, or it was just up for a Harvey or something. And I was like,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was somebody I met at one of the cons.
Cool.
And what attracted me is his artwork was like, oh my gosh, they're amazing. He's like, oh, I wrote this or I did this for Jeff Loeb. And I was
when you're Jeff Loeb, you can have your pick of the litter when
right,
it comes to artists.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
So okay.
So I started pitching Batman stories, and in 2005, they gave me my first assignment.
Excellent.
And that was the lead story in Batman Allies, Secret Files, and Origins 2005. And then from there, about a year later, I became one of the regular writers on the Batman Strikes. Oh. And that led to Strawberry Shortcake and Shrek and the other all-ages comics that I was doing at the time. I see the line
from Batman to Strawberry Shortcake.
Of course.
I mean,
it's a natural line.
Right. That is fantastic.
Thank
you know what? I know another show that's going to want to interview you. We have a show about Gotham and Batman called Before the Bat.
Cool.
They just interviewed, and I don't know his name, but the writer for the Grayson comic that's really good right now.
Oh, I'm blanking on who it is.
You know who I mean, though.
Was Christos Gage doing that?
Nope, it's a different name. We'll figure it out. He's writing the great. Go to Before the Bat. It's an interview that was just on there.
Sure.
And it was so great to listen to, and I'm like, you need more writers on here. So I'll connect you to them, too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Get that word out there. So that is really
Thanks, man.
A great story, man.
Thanks.
I love it.
You know, there have been a lot of journalists who have made the jump to comics. Alan Moore, Mark Wade. Mark had been a comics journalist like me, and Alan had been a newspaper and magazine journalist.
Right. Well, you can read their books, man.
Sure.
I mean, especially Alan Moore, like every third page is, here's an entire page of text.
Yeah.
Written like a story out of a newspaper.
Yeah.
You could tell. Oh, but they're good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you an Alan Moore fan?
I am an Alan Moore fan.
Okay. So am I. I love Alan Moore.
In fact, the comic book store where I'm a regular shopper, my local comic book store, which is Dreamland Comics in Libertyville.
Oh, I love Dreamland, yeah.
They just picked up a collection of Superman books, hundreds and hundreds of books. And I'm going through the pile just to see what's there. And 2 of Alan's early stories were Superman stories, 2 of his first DC books.
Wow.
And I found them in the pile. And I don't know if they were destined to go to the quarter box where they were headed, but I pointed them out to the manager and said, you guys need to know you got some special books here.
Yeah. Of course, you said, I'll give you a quarter each.
I had them ready.
Okay.
Books that were already in my collection.
Now, do they know you're a writer? They know you there?
Yeah.
They know you, okay.
Yeah.
I've talked to other people that write net, and they go, oh, yeah, I shop here. And, like, they have no idea. And I'm like, you need to kind of tell them they'll have you out for signings. And
I do signings every time I've got a new book out at Dreamland. They order my books for me. It's terrific. Gotta
love it.
Yeah. Every comic book writer or artist, or letterer or inker for that matter, should really have a relationship with their local store, because it's a relationship that works both ways. They can promote your work.
Yes.
You can promote their store.
Yes.
By saying, just like I'm doing now with you,
yes.
Hey, I buy my comics at Dreamland Comics. That's where you can go get them.
Well, and you know what? For something like this, this is a perfect platform because we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to Dreamland Comics. We know the one out here in Schaumburg.
Different chain, different owners.
Right, but didn't they start out as the same?
They did.
And yeah. And I love Dreamland. Great
it's
store.
A great store.
So very cool. Yeah, I know it's different owners, but doesn't matter. Once the people hear the name, they know, okay, that place. So, yeah, very cool.
Thank you.
So, okay, we've figured that little line out.
Okay.
We go to Strawberry Shortcake. Now, you were assigned this, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Or you were like, I've got this great Strawberry Shortcake story where Boysenberry comes and...
I had actually done, the publisher of the Strawberry Shortcake book was Ape Entertainment.
Yeah, I remember Ape. Are they still around?
Kind of.
Okay. Are they the ones that did the Ape, the Comic-Con thing, the alternative press one? Were they involved with that?
No, I don't
Ape
think
is
so.
an alternative press expo. I remember that.
No, that's different.
It's different.
Different organization.
I always think of them as the same.
Right.
But I remember they published, and then they were doing indie comics, and I'm like, who's this?
Ape was doing a lot of stuff that was all ages comics and also tied into video games.
Yes, they did like Sonic and those other ones, right? Wasn't that Ape?
I don't know if it was Sonic. I'm blanking on the book now, but there was one iPod game, that had a comic book.
Sure.
And it sold a jillion copies.
Right.
But they got the license to Strawberry Shortcake, and I had been working on their Shrek comic.
Yes.
They had license to Shrek too. And I enjoy doing all ages comics, and I heard they were doing Strawberry Shortcake. And I'm not a Strawberry Shortcake fan.
Really? I thought I pegged you as one.
My sister was. My little sister was in the 70s and 80s. But it wasn't anything I was interested in at all.
Right.
But I thought, how cool would it be to work with my daughter on a comic book? And she was into Strawberry Shortcake.
Yes.
And I asked Meredith hey, would you like to work on a comic book with me? And she was 9 at the time.
Yep.
And at 9 years old, became the youngest working writer in comics.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And that was the only reason why I took the job.
Right.
So I could work,
do it with your daughter, sure.
So I could work on something with her. And we had 2 stories that we shared a byline, and I had 2 that I had a solo byline that I did on my own.
Okay.
And it was a great experience. It was a lot of fun. And the guys
Fantastic.
The guys at Ape were terrific to work with too.
Are they still around?
David Hedgecock, who was the big boss at Ape, wound up jumping to, I believe, IDW. The company was
makes sense because they do all the licensed.
Right.
And I love IDW books.
The company was in limbo for a while. Ape was in limbo for a while and is now coming back. One of the things that they got the license for, and it's just been sitting there, was Sesame Street. There was supposed to be a line of Sesame Street comics.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm told that that's now coming back, that those will be published.
Well, and Netflix has the rights to Sesame Street now, so it is going to get very big again.
I hope so.
Well, they banked on it. I think they did 5 years. So they will have exclusive on Netflix, and then after they air on Netflix for a certain period of time, it'll go to PBS.
Great.
So it's going to be a lot of exposure for the whole franchise. And the other thing I read about that, and this is where your Ape buddies might be like inching towards, and if they're not, hopefully they're hearing this and going, ooh, light bulb. The inside track is Netflix is hoping to develop a second series that is almost like not the Muppet Show and not the new Muppet Show, but like another, like, instead of being here's the educational thing, but like a story, like the Follow That Bird movie, like a story in that world that is a second series. So older, like teenagers and adults can enjoy it too.
Oh, that would be neat.
It's not going to be Breaking Bad with Big Bird, but how awesome would that be, though?
Yes.
Snuffy has the blue crystal. Yeah. Yeah, Cole Vallis. That's who it was.
Excellent.
Yeah, really cool. Really interesting. So, not as interesting as this one. Okay. So now we got the kitty thing out.
Right.
Now we move into where one of the things that attracted me, 2 things that attracted me, aside from the fact you talked to me, were the Strawberry Shortcake thing with your daughter. I thought was really fascinating. And now you've fleshed that out. I'm even more fascinated. It was your horror stuff you did.
Right.
Kokomo? Is that the name?
Kagemono.
Kagemono. I get it wrong. I even say it wrong when I'm looking at it. So, all right, say it again.
Kagemono.
Kagemono.
Which
now, you wrote a short story in it, correct?
Yeah, I have the lead story in the 2nd edition of Kagemono, which is an Australian horror anthology. There were 2 editions.
Yeah.
We've been begging Jason to come out with a 3rd. Jason Franks is the editor and publisher of that book. and I'd love to do another short for him. It just hasn't materialized yet.
Yeah.
The story that I wrote for that was the first horror story that I'd ever written as a comic book. I love the horror genre.
Yeah, yeah.
I love horror movies. I'm a big Clive Barker and Stephen King fan.
So am I. Clive Barker's Books of Blood is
Brilliant stuff.
Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. And I knew that given the opportunity, I wanted to try my hand at horror. And Jason said, I'm putting together this horror anthology. I'd love you to pitch something for it. Do you have a story that you'd like to do? And the story that I pitched to him was Daddy's Girl. And I wound up teaming for I think the second time with an artist named Marvin Mann, who goes by the pen name MP Man.
okay.
Terrific guy. We've done 8 comic books together now.
Great.
Daddy's Girl is about a father and daughter on the run during a zombie outbreak, and very, very, very bad things happen.
I
And
love that.
of the 7 or 8 short stories that I've done, it remains my single favorite short story.
You know what? I read that. I read that story, and it is fantastic.
Thank you.
And I'm a big zombie fan. I have been before the wave of zombie fandom. I loved all that stuff.
Sure.
And it, to me, is one that belongs on the lexicon. The stories that you go, this is a story that stays. How I felt when I read Walking Dead the first time and went,
Yeah.
this isn't a rehash. This is a story I want to remember. And that's how I felt about yours.
Well, I think something that I took from The Walking
Although I
Dead.
call it Kokomo, so.
That's all right. Something that I took from The Walking Dead as I was writing Daddy's Girl. Walking Dead really isn't about zombies, and
No.
neither is Daddy's Girl.
Right.
It's about humanity.
It's about the relationship.
And their relationships.
Yeah.
Daddy's Girl is about the lengths that this father will go to protect his family, and how when things go bad, and they go really, really bad, the things he has to do to protect his family and for his family.
Yeah.
And when you get to that last page, when you get to the cliffhanger, the reveal at the end, I get chills still reading that story.
I'm actually kind of getting them right now
And-
because I
and
know
it's
what happens.
It's been, 4 or 5 years since I wrote that story, and I get chills knowing what he has to do at the end of that story.
Did you bring a copy tonight?
I didn't, unfortunately.
Oh, look at that face. She wanted to buy one. I knew who was looking already.
But you can order one from me through Facebook or another form of social media.
Yes. Oh, she'll be your stalker for a while. Look
It's
out.
also available on Amazon.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I wish there was another
Thank you.
volume coming out. So
Thanks. Well,
let's encourage.
I've done quite a bit of horror since then. That was my first horror story. Other horror pieces that I've done have appeared in Omega Comics Presents, which is published by Pop Goes
great.
the Icon, my regular small press publisher.
That's who you're with now, and
Right.
that's your regular, right?
I also did a self-published zombie story last year called Survival that was drawn by Mark Stegebauer.
I don't know this one.
Survival is a very similar story in that it's a suburban zombie story,
Okay.
but set in the Midwest. It's actually set in the Chicago suburbs at the beginning of an outbreak.
Sure.
Things are going bad on day one.
Sure.
And you see what happens to this family at the beginning of the outbreak, which is late summer, early fall,
Okay.
to the end of the outbreak, which is midwinter.
Okay.
And very, very, very bad.
Yeah, bad things are gonna
bad
happen.
Things
Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
These are not happy stories.
No. And something that I like so much about Survival is it's a family story. It's a father, it's a wife, and a daughter who's about 12, 13 years old, about Meredith's age, as a matter
Sure.
of fact. And they all become very different people by the end of the story. Much in the way the characters in Walking Dead do. They become very, very different people by the end of the piece.
Not Michonne as much, but
Well, you don't know
she
what
has
Michonne,
evolved.
But you don't know what Michonne was like before.
Well, did you ever read the comic, the free comic that they
The
gave?
one in Playboy?
No, the one that they gave free. Maybe it was in Playboy. I don't know. They gave a free one away that showed her backstory.
That first appeared in Playboy.
Okay, I didn't know that. It's if you read that and then you watch and then you read through the series.
Yeah.
It's actually she doesn't change a lot. We are revealed a lot more about her. Whereas Rick, different guy from book 1 to book 100.
Yeah.
It is different.
One of the things that I love so much about...
I love Michonne, by the way. Don't think I'm
Yes.
throwing her under the bus, man. She's one of my favorite characters ever.
One of the things that I love so much about Walking Dead, and people don't really talk about this a lot, Rick is seen as the natural leader of the group, both in the comics and in the TV show.
Right.
He's a bad leader.
He is.
If you really want to think about it, he has not made a good decision.
Well, they
over the
address
length-
that in the book and on the show.
Yeah.
But people usually act like, no, he's the leader, and now.
He really shouldn't be.
he should.
He really shouldn't be. There are more capable leaders.
Yes.
But because he used to wear a badge and because he talks with authority.
He has the authority thing, yeah.
Right. There are characters, especially in the show, who are much more capable leaders than he is.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see, both in the comic book and in the series, I'd like to see where that winds up.
You know, one thing, not to make this the Walking Dead podcast, but one thing that I really love, I've read all the comics to a point. I think I'm a couple behind right now. And the show, they're so different in so many ways.
Absolutely.
But one of the things that really gets me is Carol. Hated her in the comics, hated her in the beginning of the show to the point it was like, please, with this character. Right now, Carol might be number one for me. When she's on, I'm like, bake those cookies, man. Pull that knife out and put on that blood on your forehead and do your thing.
Carol to me is the...
Yeah, look at the flowers, Lizzie. That made her like the iconic character for me.
Carol to me is the natural leader of that group. That
she
is
wasn't,
evolved, not
but
at all.
she is.
But she has evolved into a survivor.
Yes.
She has evolved.
She is the true survivor of the group. Daryl being number two and Michonne being like sharing the number two spot. I agree.
I think Michonne is still too antisocial.
Yes.
And I mean clinically antisocial.
Yes. Which makes her tough in the leadership role. Why she can't be number one.
Exactly right.
Daryl has the same problem. He's charming in that, but he doesn't play well in the group. Like as a leader.
But I think any of the three of them, I mean, one of the big tests of a leader is fight or flight. How well do you perform in a crisis? Any of the three of them, they're going to protect the others.
Right.
I think Carol really understands what is needed to survive.
Yes.
And what is needed not only for her to survive, but for the group to survive and for humanity to survive.
And she does an incredible job of caretaking as she's doing these things that you're going, what is she doing? And you realize that she has a very specific... See, I'm big on this with writing, and I wrote screenplays and that. My big thing is always looking at what is their value system and what is the ethical standpoint they go from. When you can boil it down to that, you can really figure it out, it becomes very apparent who this character is. And the best characters, it doesn't have to be like they only do this and they only do that. It's you get the internal struggle they have when they make this decision, but this is their standpoint. And she is beautiful with that.
In the show, I think, and this is something I look at as a writer, who has the best arc? Who is the best story
Carol.
arc? Who has developed the most? Who has the most internal conflict? Who has the most external conflict?
Yeah.
Who is growing as a character the most?
Yeah.
I think Carol's the answer.
Yeah.
Carol's
I agree.
arc is a tremendous arc. I think Daryl's is easily number two.
I think so too. Look at him in the beginning.
Yes.
He's just brother number one, doesn't really, he just...
Overshadowed by his brother, the racism, I don't care about anybody,
and
I'm
now
just a dirty
he's
redneck.
Gorgeous character, man.
Yeah.
Just great. Not gorgeous the way you think he's gorgeous. When his arms come out and he holds the baby. Remember when he held the baby, Martha? Yeah.
But
she just dropped her iPad. She got so excited.
A very, very deep characterization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So, have you ever read, this is going back to comics, Rich Perez has been out here from Tango Comics. You ever read Tango Comics?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, they're a small press. Really good.
Okay.
And they only come out with books every once in a while. Rich and Rage do it. Rich is the writer. And he wrote a zombie story called Descent.
Ooh.
Really good. And his thing is he writes them in like 6-episode arcs. So he tells the story and he's done.
Yeah.
And I really like his horror stuff is really cool because it is from a writer's standpoint again. Not just like I'm going to crank out these things and they're going to attack. And the zombies are the backdrop that cause all the trouble. But the real conflict is within the humans themselves. So, all right, enough about Walking Dead and other people's work. I want to talk about you. So you've got Old Wounds. Let's talk about Old Wounds, and let's hold this stuff up. So this is Russell's book that is lighting the world on fire, in my opinion. I keep seeing things about it. And as long as I'm holding that up, this is also Russell. Yeah, get it in the light there. All right. So Old Wounds. Let's talk about Old Wounds.
Old Wounds is a critically acclaimed...
This is not a zombie book.
Not a zombie book at all. Critically acclaimed 4-issue miniseries from Pop Goes the Entertainment that I wrote, drawn by John Bivens, lettered by Josh Southall, who's a terrific letterer. It is a 4-issue miniseries that was collected into a trade paperback that was released this month from Pop
Oh, it
Goes
just
the
came
Icon.
out this month?
Just came out. The next week, Stranger came out, which is an all-ages science fiction story drawn by former Chicagoan Dirk Tiede.
Oh, really?
Who I think
Dirk Tiede, yeah.
I was going to say, I think your fine bride knew him. I bet you've met him too.
Yes. Martha, you've met Dirk Tiede. You would recognize the art. She's not listening to us. This is common for
But
me.
we were talking about that earlier.
Well, yeah, my voice is going. She's tuned out. So
Gotcha.
At the end of that, she'll say, "When are we starting?"
Old Wound's not at all a horror story, although certainly scary elements in it. It is the story of a retired superhero and the ghosts from his past who have come back to haunt him.
I was going to say it has supernatural elements. It's just not a horror book.
Not even supernatural. It's a crime thriller.
Yeah, right. But it's got the ghosts of his past. It's like that episode of Sopranos when what's his name was seeing all the people he'd killed. You remember that one?
I do.
With the hair.
Tony was being.
But no,
visited
it was the one that has the gray.
Paulie. Yes.
Paulie Walnuts.
Right.
Or whatever his name is. And he went to the therapist, and he was sitting in this therapy thing, and all of a sudden, all these ghosts of people he had killed were there, and he's like, I'm seeing ghosts. And it's not a ghost story.
Right.
But this is an internal haunting, correct?
Well, no, I don't mean...
I haven't read this yet, so...
Okay, I don't mean ghosts...
You explain, I'll shut up.
Let me explain it. I don't mean ghosts literally.
Right.
I mean ghosts figuratively. The story...
That's what Paulie was experiencing, too.
The story starts with police officers knocking on Michael Lane's door and telling him that his wife has been murdered.
Okay.
And he deals with that, and they tell him to come into the police station. We need to talk to you. And he's very sad. He's a middle-aged man. He's pumping around with a cane. And he walks off into his bedroom, looks at his wife's picture, presses a secret button on the wall, and then a secret door opens, and his crime-fighting gear, their crime-fighting gear, they used to be a husband and wife crime-fighting team.
Yes.
And those are the ghosts that have come back to haunt him, that somebody has killed her.
Does he think somebody knows?
Well, when his ex-partner shows up and someone tries to blow him up too, then he starts to wonder.
Yeah.
And people in Michael's life who knew their secret are being knocked off one by one, and he is drawn into the mystery. Years after giving up the mask and the costume, he's drawn into solving this crime again. And it's a superhero story, but it's not a superhero story. The only time you ever see masks, the only time you ever see costumes are in flashbacks. It's a crime story. It's a crime thriller. If you like The Wire, if you like Homicide: Life on the Street, if you like Law and Order, it's that kind of story that happens to exist in a world
of superhero.
In a world where there were men and women who
I was going to
wore
say,
capes.
are superheroes still around in this world?
No.
So this is kind of like Watchmen before the Watchmen come back. After the
kind of.
original Watchmen have disappeared, and they've all hid it in their closets.
A bit.
It just reminds me of that, but not...
It's a little bit like The Incredibles.
That's what Martha just said.
In that...
Is Edna in it? I just want to know.
Pardon?
Is Edna in it?
Ed is not in it. There is no Edna mode. I love Edna mode. It was this part of their life. And the decisions you make as a youth, especially the bad ones, will so often come back and haunt you.
Right.
And that's what the protagonist of the story, Michael Lane, has to deal with. That he made these decisions, they made these decisions early in their lives, and they thought they put them behind them, and now they've come back to haunt them.
Wow. I'm going to go to the audience for questions because I'll probably have a couple out here. But before we do that, I have another question about this. What gave you the idea? You told me the story of how you got your Superman idea.
Sure.
And I'm sure we could probably find ideas for a number of things. But what made this one click?
It actually came out of something that I was writing for Batman.
Okay.
Batman is a non-powered superhero.
Right.
He is a normal person. Anybody can do what Batman does, given the right amount of money, the right amount of training, the right amount of time.
Yeah.
What if you were Batman and weren't good at it? That was my question for Michael Lane. What if you weren't as good at it as Batman? What if you made the decision, I'm going to go fight crime in a costume, and you were bad at it?
Oh.
If you were injured.
Was he bad?
He was not successful. I'll put it that way. He wasn't a goof. He
didn't last.
No, he had an injury early on in his life, early on in his career as a crime fighter, and it was a catastrophic injury. And he didn't have Bruce's money. He didn't have Alfred to fix him up.
Right.
He didn't have Bruce's money to go find a good surgeon. he was a regular guy with a regular income and a regular life. What if a regular person was Batman for a while, and then something catastrophic happened? What would the rest of his life be like if he didn't have Bruce's billions? And that was the question that I wanted to answer with Old Wounds. What would his life be like? And we see a man who is physically broken, who's alone, who's divorced, who's an alcoholic. And to me, that's what I think Bruce would be.
Right.
Without the billions, without Alfred.
If he lost it all.
Yeah,
we only hear the stories where he's still got it.
Right.
If things went south, Bernie Madoff got a hold of him.
Well,
and really took it down. I mean, if you're taking it from the start of him that way.
Right.
He didn't start that way.
Right.
So, yeah.
But fortunately, Bruce would never wind up in the same situation because he would always find a way to survive.
Right.
And always find a way to succeed. He's been broken. We saw it with Bane.
Spoiler.
The mansion has been burned to the ground.
Spoiler,
He has lost the people in his lives.
Right.
But he has the moral fortitude and has the willpower to succeed.
Right.
What if he didn't? What if there was a person
It's a great story.
Didn't?
Yeah.
And that's what Old Wounds came from.
Love it. Now this, I know I've seen this. Did this win an award, or is it up for an award or something that I saw recently? I thought, was it nominated? I thought I saw something.
Not as far as I know.
How do we get it nominated? What do we do?
The award season starts next year for books that come out this year.
Okay, well,
so
I'm encouraging because it sounds incredible, and your other stuff is that good.
There are fan-driven comic book awards. I think anybody can nominate books for the Harvey Award. I'm not sure about that. But
Pretty sure about the Harvey.
I think anybody can nominate books for the Harvey Award. The big one, the big award, the Eisner, is of course industry driven.
Sure.
And I didn't write it to win awards. I didn't write it to get nominated. I wrote it because I had a great story to tell, and I knew John Bivens was going to be the artist to work with on that because he loves the gritty, he loves the grime.
Yeah, the artwork is really cool.
A background in horror. So there are some horrific scenes in the book. There's one of them.
Yeah, there's one right there. Yeah,
with people lying with body parts missing.
Yeah, the faces are really tight on here too.
I knew John was going to be the guy to tell the story the way I wanted it told.
Yeah, I love his. He gets a lot of expression out of the faces, and some of them very minimalistic.
Yeah,
and still pulls it across. So that's really tough to do.
Yeah,
very good.
John and I had worked on a prior story together, a short story called One of Us, that stars the police detectives who investigate the crimes in Old Wounds. And as an extra in the trade paperback, which again just came out this month, we included Old Wounds in the trade paperback. So not only do you get the 4 issues of Old Wounds, you get the short story One of Us as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yep.
So anybody out here, as we're going, does anyone have any questions? Anyone want to ask Russell anything? Sometimes we get questions, sometimes we don't. You don't have to be panicked out there. All right, think about it. We might... Oh, good.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Thank you.
People, you can download it right now.
Very cool.
Oh, you can do it on Kindle. All
Which
right.
book? Old Wounds? Kagemono is available on Kindle? I didn't even know that. That's excellent.
So there's
Thank
a
you very
tip for
much.
everybody. And I will put this stuff in the show notes, too, and I'll probably write on there, hey, get it on Kindle.
Great.
That way people know they can do that.
Cool.
Really cool, man. And now this one. So this one, this is your new series.
Strangers is very, very different. It's a standalone story. That is the first all-ages story I've done since Strawberry Shortcake.
Really?
I've known Dirk Tiede, the artist, for 9 or 10 years, almost my entire career in comics. Dirk is a former Chicagoan. We've got a lot of friends in common. And we were both guests of honor at the A-Kon anime show in Dallas a few years ago and decided over Japanese steak and shrimp and lots of sake
Can't really see
that
it.
we needed to work on a comic book together.
Yeah, and you know what? This style is so good for this type of story.
It is.
Really good.
Dirk has always worked in a manga style that I love. It's a really clean style.
Yeah.
And I knew that whatever story I wrote for him, that it would have to be something that fit that art style.
Yeah. Well,
And-
sci-fi is spot on.
Thank you. And he did an absolutely tremendous job. He penciled, inked, and colored it himself. He lettered the book himself. He didn't want to give up any kind of creative control. I wrote the script. He ran with it and did just tremendous work.
So, okay, let's talk about that process for a second. As a writer, Because I'm a firm believer that comics are just a wonderful medium to work in. A lot of people that are like aspiring filmmakers, you know how expensive that is? You think this is expensive? That's ridiculous.
Sure.
This is a way that you can tell those big stories and get them out there, and then if somebody wants to make a film, you can start that process.
I'll tell you something, and this is something that Jeff Loeb told me. DC for a while was writing a comic book, a comic book based on the Smallville TV show.
Sure.
And I wanted to pitch for it. I loved the show and wanted to pitch for it. And the first pitches that I sent to Jeff, he said they're too much like the television show. They'd be great television episodes.
Right, but it's
a comic book. You need to do stuff in the comic that they can't afford to do in television.
Right.
Bigger explosions,
right.
Bigger battle scenes, everything's bigger. If you're going to put a monster in a comic book, it can be the biggest, ugliest, freakiest monster you've ever seen.
Right.
And you can't do it in the television show or in a movie because the budget to create that creature would be outrageous.
Right.
Look at Watchmen. The ending of the movie,
ending of the book versus the ending of the movie.
The ending of the book versus the ending of the movie. Very different.
It also
endings.
wouldn't work with the big squid. That would have been bizarre.
Well,
but in the comic, it's fantastic.
How would the giant space squid look on screen?
Right.
It would be laughable. Mm-hmm. But people buy it in the comic book.
It wasn't laughable in the book.
Not at all. Especially the way Gibbons drew it. That you only see, if you remember the sequence, you see a bit of tentacle, you see a bit of beak, you see a bit of eye, and then you see all of Manhattan and how enormous this thing is. You'd never be able to pull that off in a television show or in a movie.
No.
That's only something you can do in a comic book.
And if you did, it would look like you were trying to save on budget.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the reveal.
Right.
You can't reveal that same way.
Exactly right.
Unless it's all dark. And then a little reveal, but then as soon as it's lit, it looks terrible.
Yeah, as soon as it's lit.
But in the comics, you can do it.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, and I've noticed this as a movie fan, really bad action movies, really bad horror movies, the scenes are always shot at night, or at least it's made to look at night.
Yeah.
It's not because night is scarier. It's because you can hide bad special effects, and you can hide low budget if you shoot it in the dark.
Right.
So some of the later Predator movies, I'm thinking of the Predator versus Alien movies, are shot exclusively at night.
Right.
They're all at night.
Right.
So you don't have to show anything.
Right.
Whereas the original Alien, although the monster was hidden so much of that movie is very well lit.
Yeah, you can see everything.
You can see everything.
The dark can hide, I don't want to say mistakes.
Imperfections,
certainly. Yes.
And a poor budget.
Right.
You look at Aliens, the sequel.
Right.
Incredibly well lit movie. Despite the content.
Right.
That's a really brightly lit movie.
Yes. Because
it's James Cameron and he wants to show off all of his toys.
Right.
And he's working with what at the time had to be $150 million budget.
Yeah. Yeah.
By today's standards.
Yeah. At least.
Easily $150
because Terminator 2 at the time was $2 million.
Right.
So
$200
million. $2 million. That would be a Southgate Media Group production.
Right. But
not dollars either.
Boy, what kind of budget do you guys have?
I was going to say pennies.
$2 million movie.
Pennies and borrowed.
But you look at the later Predator versus Alien movies, and everything's in the dark, and you don't see anything, because they were cheap productions.
Well, you look at that with any especially horror series.
Yeah.
The first one, you can see what's going on typically, and as they get deeper into the cut, okay, like you're not seeing it. Production value is going down, budget's going down.
Yep.
That's just what happens. In comics, you can't really hide it the same way.
Comics, you have an unlimited budget to work with and an unlimited imagination.
So this goes back to the question I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. That was great. So when you write, you mentioned that Dirk ran with it. Are you a writer who likes to describe your panels? Do you like to go, here's the dialogue and a rough outline of what I'm looking for, go? What's your style? Or does it change?
I write in full script. And most writers today work in full script, where you say, page 1, panel 1, Bruce walks into the room, dialogue.
Got it.
Page 1, panel 2, Bruce walks over to a desk, dialogue.
Okay.
I write in full script because...
Do you give as much as we see Bruce's back, a shot from behind? Because I've read that give direction. Because as a script writer, for trying to write like movie scripts, I ran into that there also. If a guy's making his own movie, he might not say all that. A guy trying to get his story across, Charlie Kaufman is going to say, you're seeing the back of his ear and it closes in. Are you that writer?
Sometimes.
Okay.
It depends on what artist I'm working with and how well they understand my shorthand and how well I understand their shorthand. And by shorthand, I mean the way they work,
right.
the language in which they work. Are we talking the same language?
Sure.
On the other hand, if it's somebody new, or if I'm writing a script and I don't know who's going to draw it yet, my scripts are fairly well detailed.
Sure.
They're not Alan Moore detailed. I'd say more in line.
Most aren't.
More in line.
You ever read the script from Hell?
Oh,
holy moly!
I mean, you know Dave Gibbons' story about Watchmen.
No.
It's terrific. You can get the Watchmen scripts in the Absolute Watchmen collection.
I haven't seen this. Okay.
It's the script.
I bet it's great.
The script is tremendous, but there's so much detail that Dave had to go through with 2 highlighters. One, to highlight the really important stuff that had to be in the story. 2, to highlight the stuff that probably should be in the story but wasn't as important, and anything he didn't highlight was ignored.
Wow.
Because there's so much detail in an Alan Moore script.
Yeah.
In mine, there's a level of detail, but it's not that detailed. It's more in line with how a Greg Rucka writes, how a Devin Grayson writes. Jeff Loeb, on the other hand, has a very bare bones scripting style.
Okay.
Very limited set direction. His scripts look like movie scripts because that's his background, writing for TV, writing for movies.
Right.
And he's worked with artists who understand his language. He also gives his artists a lot of room to play with. Whereas I want the artist to know, and I say that at the top of every one of my scripts, I want the artist to know how I see the story in my head, how I see the pages laid out, how I see the panels laid out. But if you as the artist can make the story better, please make the story better.
There you go.
That note is on
That's
the top
what I was looking for.
That note is on the top of every one of my scripts. This is how I see the story in my head. If you can make it better, make it better.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Very nice. All right, before we wrap up, any other questions for Russell? Anybody?
Anyone?
I told you this happens.
Anyone?
They're too busy buying your books right now.
Well, I appreciate that.
Russell, can you give any social media, any place people can find your stuff? We've talked about some of it. Let's put it right here at the end of the show. Lay it out here.
You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Russell.Lissau. Okay. You can find me on Twitter at @RLissau, RLISSAU, and also on Instagram @RLISSAU.
Great. And they can pick up your books. We know Kindle. We know Amazon.
Comixology, Amazon, any of your local comic book stores. popgoestheicon.com. You can find the books there.
Great.
That's the publisher.
Yep.
And of course, anywhere you can buy DC Comics, we'll have, or at least be able to order the back issues that I've written there.
And one more shout out: Dreamland in
Libertyville.
That's
the place.
So if you want to be a creepy stalker and run into Russell just accidentally, that's where you do it.
On Wednesday afternoons, that's
Let's
where
get
you
real
can
specific.
Find me.
All right. And good luck to your daughter. I hope Meredith has
thanks,
a nice,
man.
happy career, whatever she chooses it to be.
Whatever she chooses to do.
Pretty awesome that she's done some of this, and she'll never forget that enormous gift that she was given. So, yes, we would love to have her come out.
She would love that.
You know what? In fact, so this con turned into not a con, it turned into the Russell interview. But we do these periodically, and like one night we had 8 different artists and writers out here. So on one of those, as we're doing those, I will send you a note and just say, hey, Russell, and you and Meredith can come out and we'll throw you on a panel or we'll talk and
Happy to
do our
do
thing.
it.
That would be awesome.
Thanks, man.
We'll make Albert the Alien come out the same night. So
Cool.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you so much,
it.
Russell. Thank you, Blue Box. Thank you, everybody. Buy
Thank you.
Russell's stuff. And you too.